puzzling crimes that we've ever considered. Just who is Darlie Routier? Is she capable of killing her little boys? Did this woman ruthlessly stab her sons and then slash her own neck to make it look like an intruder did it? Or did it happen exactly the way Darlie said it did? Was there an attacker, maybe two, who invaded her home in Texas, and now she is sitting on death row paying the price? Well, the experts will say what they will about this case, and you'll hear from them today. But the viewers told us that this story has become about perception. Watch. I was more convinced of her probable guilt then than I am now.
I don't believe at all that she is remorseful about it. There was not enough emotion. I don't know anybody, I don't care how much medication that you're on, who could watch and look at those horrifying pictures of these chopped up children and not have some kind of reaction, even if she didn't cry, even if she just went, you know, and just was expressing shock or something.
I have depression. I am on antidepressants. I have gone through some big scares, big illness scares, terrible things where I feel awful on the inside, but the outside does not show it. I can't cry.
But you know what? Even if she didn't shed a tear or have a reaction or raise an eyebrow, that doesn't make her a killer, does it? We have Darin, Darlie's husband, here. We have her mom. We have her mother-in-law. And I think the first question really should go to all of you. And Darin, you specifically, what does it feel like to hear audience members judge who you are, accuse your wife of things? Must be hard.
It's real hard. I mean, I just, you know, the hardest thing to deal with is the fact that we're all different on the outside. We're either different colors, different nationalities, different hair lengths. If, you know, this discrimination is what it is. I mean, we discriminate against each other no matter what we look like. It's just almost our natural ability to be able to just judge someone for what they look like and know nothing about the person that's inside or where they've come from or what they've been through and their experiences.
You all are paying a horrible price, an unthinkable price. These two little boys, these beautiful angels are gone from your life. And every shred of your life as you knew it is now different.
It's gone.
The woman that you loved and still love is behind bars, a convicted murderer. You, your job, you were living in a beautiful house. You had things. She had jewelry. You had the hot tub. You had all of that going for you. Now that's gone. And yet your love for her is as strong as ever?
It is.
When you all go to see her, when you go see your little girl, what's that like?
It's real difficult because you try to give her hope and encouragement, but so many times she'll want to talk about Devin and Damon, and you know, that's difficult for her because she's so confined in there, and if she dwelled on that all the time, I think it would just drive her insane. I think she has to put that somewhere. But so many times when we go in to see her, we leave feeling more encouraged because she encourages us.
Does she believe that she will get a new trial and she'll have a chance to say her piece, Cyrilda?
We were so sure that she would not be convicted the first time. And when it was all over, the first time I visited her, I said, let me understand it. How can God let us down? And she said, you know, Mama, I guess it wasn't enough for me to be accused of this crime. I guess I had to be convicted. But being convicted doesn't make me guilty. And if they kill me, it doesn't make me guilty.
She said if they killed her, she would be there with her sons, yes, Damon and Devin.
She said, I'll be there with them. I don't want that to happen, but that's the worst that can do to me.
Well, there are also reports that the court reporter's life is being threatened, all kinds of high drama continuing to escalate in this case that started there. We'll get to all the new evidence, and we'll tell you about the court reporter in just a minute. I want to read to you from a book called Precious Angels, and I'll tell you why. The woman who wrote this book is on my stage. You wanted this book to be damaging.
Yes, I did.
You wanted people not to shed a tear for Darlie.
I didn't want anybody to lose any sleep because she was where she was supposed to be.
She writes, Darlie Routier was a woman doomed by having it all. She has the dream house, had the boat, had the diamonds, had the hot tub, and still she needed more. She constructed an artificial life, from her pristine white carpets to the implants in her breasts. Once a doting mother who invited over all of her children's friends, she became a screaming tyrant who ordered the kids to stay the hell out of the house. As the young mother's dreams shattered one by one, her life became a hell on earth. Murdering 2 children seemed the only way out. My gosh. The woman who wrote those words, Barbara, you say now you don't feel this way?
Not at all.
What could possibly take you from this point to where you are now?
Because I know things that I didn't know when I wrote that.
Evidence?
Evidence.
Serious, tangible evidence?
Very serious, tangible evidence.
Okay. Tell us what it is, and then I'd like for you and Chris Brown, the author of a book about this case, to go through the evidence along with the family's assistance. What bits of evidence will we talk about in the show today?
We'll talk about her injuries that were not gone into in the trial.
Okay.
An adult fingerprint in blood.
That did not match Darlie or Darin.
But was consistent with her story. Other evidence that was mishandled or hidden. One being in particular that I want to discuss is the bloody couch that she was laying on.
A scuff mark, a bloody scuff mark, Chris?
Well, actually, it's an edge of where the blanket or pillow was actually laying, and there's blood all the way around it, but where it's outlined, there's not. So, and also on the pillow, there's blood on the pillowcase, and also on the pillow. And they had actually said that she had slit her throat standing up at the sink, and that's not true either.
We will run it all down with you, including the thing that got the audience yesterday, which was this sock. An athletic sock sort of like this was found 75 yards from the scene. Now, last time you were here, Barbara, you told me that you thought Darlie may have put the sock on like this, and may have, because her DNA was found inside the sock.
Right.
And may have smashed, done what with the sock on her hand?
I believe she did it. Therefore, for her skin cells to be in there, she would slip it on, just as you have. And the spots of blood, one of the boys right on top of the other, would have had to have gotten there when that sock made contact with their wounds.
All right. In a moment, never-before-seen photos of Darlie's injuries, and the family feels that these photos prove she couldn't have inflicted these wounds herself. And then this Texas attorney will tell us why he believes that the new evidence is ridiculous. We'll talk some more. Come on back.
A real true miracle that I'm here today. I mean, 2 millimeters within your carotid artery is, and just the way that they suggested that I would have to do this to myself, and it was so ludicrous to sit there and watch them, and just think, are people really believing this?
Apparently, Darin, the jury did believe it. They thought that she set this crime scene, that she cut herself to make it look like there was an intruder. We've talked before about your wife's emotional state, and there was this note that has been called a suicide note where she's writing to the 3 boys and saying, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do." What was her state of mind? There was another note that she was writing in her journal that she'd written about you and your relationship. She said, "I love Darin with all my heart, but sometimes I feel like I'm missing something, the things I used to do when I was younger." She talks about her responsibilities.
Well, I never read her diary. That was her private thing, and I mean, I figured that, you know, that was information that was between her and her diary.
Were you shocked when you found out about that journal entry?
Yeah, I was. I knew about the journal entry. She called me that day. She was blue. She was tired. She wanted, you know, me to come home and to help her with the kids. I left the office, went home. I saw that she was writing in the journal. She was, you know, we cried. I got mad at her for feeling those type of thoughts. That was the first time that I ever knew about the journal. We cried about it. You know, I told her that this was very selfish of her to even feel this way. And then after that, everything was fine. I mean, we never talked about it again. It wasn't like we were just suppressing it. It was just that it was like a phase. It was a moment, you know. And it was Darlie telling me that I need to help her a little bit more than what I had been, because I was spending a lot of time at work. And 3 children are a lot of work. I mean, you know, it's a lot of work for 2 people.
And how many people haven't thought about this maybe in a fleeting moment? I mean, if you're really honest about it, there are a lot of people in the United States that are on medication for depression.
Well, maybe someone who's being medicated for depression would be dealing with some emotions that we can't really experience. But
it was a contemplation. It wasn't an attempt. You know,
you said, Darin, you've been quoted as saying you understand why an intruder may have come into this house basically and targeted your wife. The quote was, she's a good-looking woman.
She's beautiful. I mean, look at the photos. I mean,
you said she had a beautiful body and she had, I think, big breasts was the quote.
Yeah, she did. And I've been mocked for even saying that. It's the truth. I mean, she's a 36 triple D. And, you know, even you know, Darlie is a very beautiful woman. I mean, men and women, both of them. You go into the mall, I mean, they just turn their heads. I mean, it was almost like people were just like mesmerized by her when they saw her. So did someone come in then to rape her, to sexually assault her? I don't think that was the intentions. And you said earlier that nothing was stolen. Well, my 2 boys were stolen from us. It's not about material things. It's not about what you have. It's what your family is the only thing that you can always, in every way, hang on to. It's the only thing that's important in your life. And you're still hanging on? Every bit. Since you were here, you have your family memorialized in tattoos on your arm? Yeah. Can we see that? Sure. Since you were here, you added another. And then I have the baby. That's Drake. And I did this one for a different reason. I think it's why. This is kind of like therapy to me, you know. After the boys were murdered, I had the boys' picture put on there as a memorial, but also to remind me that I was still alive, for me to feel even the pain is a feeling. When you're numb for so long, going through the grieving process, it's very difficult to deal with. Oh, I can't even imagine. I'm sure.
I noticed that a lot of people are very hostile to you, and I just want to tell you my heart goes out, and hang in there and keep trying.
You're right. There are a lot of people who've been very hostile. There's still a lot of people who say this is all a show, that they're not facing the facts, that they're in denial. But there are others like Barbara Davis who've changed because of the evidence. So when we come back, let's go through it bit by bit. See you right back here.
We were hoping to go in there and find her not guilty. We don't want to see a mother do that. I'll tell you that if my children were feet away from my head, the first child may have gotten stabbed, but the second one, he wouldn't have gotten near without getting through me.
Well, now, that pretty much gets us to an interesting point. That juror sentenced Darlie to death because they didn't, I shouldn't say because, the jury did not see all of the photographs that would indicate that Darlie had possibly struggled with an intruder. In this article defending Darlie, this is from the Dallas Observer, Ann Zimmerman wrote this, and there are photos in here of Darlie's wounds. Now, you're still impartial on your...
I feel very strongly both ways, right?
You could argue either side of it.
Absolutely.
You found these photos to be the most compelling thing to allude to a possible intruder?
Exactly. I mean, she looks like she struggled with somebody. These bruises on her arms. It's what made me look into the case further.
People said, Darin, that they thought you hit her with a baseball bat to get the bruises on her arms.
That's ridiculous. But the only... And you think she would be on death row and allow me to just stay out here and be free? I mean, come on. Well, besides, if it was baseball, it would have been, you know, a whole... You know, we're talking about... She was bruised from here all the way up into her breast area.
That's because the prosecutor couldn't explain the bruises to
Chris,
the
go up here and let's look at the photos. Could we please? I want to show them on the big screen for the audience here.
The bruises were actually on both arms. And also, the time factor involved is that the police picked her up. Here is the cut on her neck that came 2 millimeters from her carotid artery. Here's the stab wound down here. Go on to the next frame.
Now, hang on, stay there for a second, because let's say that you cut yourself, and she's right-handed. She has a knife in her right hand. Would that be the angle, or would it be the angle of someone around your neck coming up right this way?
Now, she was stabbed in the arm, so you have to remember, she stabbed herself with the arm. She would have to switch hands, stab herself in the shoulder, and then she'd have to cut her throat.
Come on. Get real.
Okay.
People are out here saying she could do that.
Okay, now remember.
You said nope, you don't have a problem with this.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with thinking that if she was stabbing her own children, that could be kick marks on her arm that they were fighting.
From a 40-pound baby.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 40-pound baby.
There's also bruises.
Ready to die?
Yeah.
Ma'am, there's also bruises on her wrist, right here, that are it's in the carpal area, to where a kick wouldn't actually do that from both sides.
Well, see, that's another point, too. I believe, just like you do, all of those things could have happened. And, in fact, I espouse them in my book because they are plausible. It could have happened, okay? But the injuries I did not see are the ones that really troubled me, that he's beginning to talk about.
Now, this photo here actually goes all the way up to her wrist. Now, this is a tight photo of it, but it actually goes all the way down to her armpit. And it goes from here all the way to here, and then on her other arm, it goes from here all the way under.
So, Barbara, you're saying these wounds were more compelling to you? Go ahead, Darlie.
Well, I was just saying, you know, they're just so extensive. You know, you just can't. It's not one of those photos. It's all of them. You have to look at all of them. Look at Chris.
Now,
well, the thing is, they were compelling, and my question is this. Why didn't the prosecutor show them? Because they couldn't explain them either.
Right.
Phil, you're an attorney. Why didn't the prosecutor show them?
There's no new evidence in this case. All of the evidence, in fact, everything that's in Chris's book is from what he took from the court records. The judge let him make copies of all these pictures.
But the jury didn't get to see it all.
Well, the jury may not have chose to see them, but the same problem is the defense attorneys... Well, now, listen. All of this is into evidence. The problem here is this is not new. This is not new evidence.
Well, we haven't got to...
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, Bill. Just hang in there with us.
I just don't think that he's leaving out parts of what really happened. I mean, if there are 900 photos and only 400 is shown, and the defense objects to that at the trial, it's not because the jury chose not to see them. It was because they were not given the opportunity to see them.
Right. And that actually goes back with the surveillance tape. The judge allowed the surveillance tape not to be seen because the lead detectives did take the fifth.
Listen to this. We talked about photos that were not shown. We talk about a transcript that may not have been accurately delivered to the jury. Well, there was an anonymous letter that was sent from jail to a district judge that reports convicted killer Darlie Routier said the court reporter who prepared the trial transcript will be killed if Routier's appeal is not successful. Someone is going to kill the court reporter if she does not falsify her records, so she'll get a new trial. The court reporter's life is in jeopardy if you, the court, make her verify the accuracy of the court records. Isn't that enough to get a new trial if the court reporter there weren't accurate records?
It very well could be, and probably, Leeza, in all candor, the best issue in this case right now from an appellate standpoint is this transcript aspect of it. The question is, we come out here, and before I came out, y'all were talking about her taking the fifth about not having any tapes, when in fact she did. That doesn't play into your hand as defending her as far as this is concerned, because if the tapes exist, then there's not going to be that issue for a new trial.
But the issue is this. The jury asked to see Darin's testimony. Now, out of 1,400 pieces of the transcript, all 1,400 pages was wrong. So then they went ahead and they did a further extension. Now, the jury asked to see his testimony, and if everything's wrong,
I'm not arguing with you about that.
Then they can't take the jury back and say, oh, by the way, we want you to look at this again.
I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm saying your argument now that there's something to do with this court reporter by taking the fifth when she really did have the tapes doesn't help your position at all.
No, it doesn't.
If the tapes are there, that's only going to hurt your position because then you are going to have a transcript.
That's not right, but the tapes prove that the transcript is wrong.
Is wrong.
So you don't have the information.
Arbitrarily typed in what you want.
The audio tapes prove the transcript.
You know what's not admissible? What's not admissible at a trial, of course, are polygraph tests. But there were polygraph tests given to both Darlie and Darin. We'll talk about the results of that right after this. Stay tuned. What if this regression therapy demonstrates that the state was right, that Darlie did do it? Is anybody prepared to hear that?
It's not right because it's how they built this case up. They said Darlie went crazy and was depressed, and because she was too heavy and wasn't the center of attention. Well, that's the biggest crock I've ever heard in my life.
But
they had no motive.
None of you are afraid to take this next step? The next step we were talking about was regression therapy so that Darlie could remember exactly what had happened that night. Did you do the regression therapy?
Yes, we did 2 sessions.
What happened?
Well, there are 5 points that they're going to use in her writ. But the problem is when we went to the warden and asked for permission, because to do forensic regressive therapy, you have to have a videotape on the subject as soon as the doctor walks into the room, and then you never shut that videotape off. Well, everybody in the world has been allowed in there with a videotape, but when she consulted her legal people, they said, no, you can't have a video camera in there. So the doctor took another doctor in with them, so there are 2, and that's part of her appeal. But we do not know if they will allow it, if it'll be accepted by the court.
Did she remember details?
There are 5 points that prove Darlene is not lying, that she was attacked, that there were intruders, but that will be brought out.
If there's a new trial?
No, it'll be brought out, hopefully, in the appeal.
Or we may not have to have appeal if it's overturned with this court reporter, though.
Okay. Barbara, the whole audience is saying, and they're absolutely right, we want to know what it is that caused you to turn on this, because you were as far in the place of guilt as you could possibly be.
Right.
Go.
Right. Some of the very first witnesses in this trial that the state brought out were the doctors and nurses that tended to Darlie. And I was interested in what they had to say. And they told me that she was unemotional and cold and uncaring.
They said she looked at the corpse of her son in the trauma unit and had no response.
Right. And one of the things that had an impact, and it wasn't just one thing, it was thing after thing. One of the things was when I saw the focus notes that these nurses keep.
What did the notes say?
Well, I brought some here to read to you.
Because that was very damaging. They said she didn't want to hold baby Drake.
Exactly. This is from the focus notes of a nurse that took care of Darlie. Patient, crying, visibly upset, very emotional, periods of angry sobbing, family at bedside with chaplain, patient very tearful. Then the nurse noted at 1200 when they were concluding their shift, patient continues to weep, which meant Darlie literally cried throughout the whole entire 7-hour shift. When it came to the testimony, this is the exact testimony. The state asked, when she was in your care, did you notice that she seemed upset to you? Answer, she was, her eyes were tearful, but she had a very flat effect. Didn't seem to have a lot of emotion. Now,
so you're saying it's what they didn't hear that would have changed it. Would that have changed it for you, audience?
No. Okay.
All right, let's come out here and we'll take it bit by bit. Be right back. The audience told me that you were persuaded to think more favorably of Darlie after hearing the nurse's notes. Most people were. You're still saying no?
No, because it still makes her look bad because she wasn't showing that much of a remorse.
But
they lied. She doesn't understand.
She didn't do anything.
She didn't understand that the nurses lied. Make her
Yeah, but
understand.
this is a great example of being able that the jury didn't know this. They only saw and heard what they were told. They didn't know before, and they were shown the focus notes, but they didn't really follow it. They didn't, it was kind of complicated to go over. And what they were also told and what they knew was that they had a brainstorming session before the district attorney with all of the nurses in the same room. They showed them all the evidence and said, hey,
Chris, that happens in every prosecution.
In every case. Isn't that something? So tampering with witnesses is something that we
Well, it
need
did
to do.
happen on our side.
I don't know about you, but
That's
I would have a problem with that.
Yeah, they did do us that way.
If that was the case, then why don't they just let everybody sit in the audience as they do the court, but instead they take all the witnesses out and bring them in one at a time so they don't know what the other one is saying.
Chris, I've been doing this for 25 years. I have personally tried 13 death penalty cases. This is not my first rodeo. For you to sit here and think that there's something unusual
of getting everybody in the room,
Texas, to getting everybody together, or the defense lawyers for that matter,
all the witnesses
together, And just the way
have them change their mind.
Well, now,
out of what they wrote 2 days after what happened.
Suggesting that you suborn perjury. Let me ask this. I want to ask Barbara something real quick. 10 years, better than 10 years she worked for the district attorney's office. Barbara, on how many occasions in the 10 years you worked there were you a part of a conspiracy with the police department, the district attorney's office, the judge, and the defense attorneys to put somebody on death row?
Yeah, a victim's advocate.
To believe this, you would have to believe...
So her role would be a very big one.
No.
I'm so shocked by all this.
To believe this, you'd have to believe that the Rowlett Police Department,
we do,
that the district attorney's office is one of the largest DA's offices in this country. Everybody involved on the defense team, I guess, because they didn't do their job, and a district judge all colluded together to put a housewife on death row for killing two
But wasn't there tremendous pressure to solve this case?
There's tremendous pressure to solve all cases. But what they do, Leeza, is they did in this case is this crime scene was contained. There was nowhere else to go. Well,
now you guys feel, talk about that. Talk about the contamination.
These things do not happen in a sterile vacuum. You've got two kids that one's dead and one's dying on the floor. Now, I've listened to you.
The police don't make mistakes.
Sure
Is that
they
what
do.
you're saying?
Sure they do. There's nobody represents more police officers.
Absolutely.
They're human. But what you don't do is you don't about a crime scene that people have walked through when you've got victims in there and potential other intruders at that point in time, and the police are doing their jobs. The paramedics are doing their jobs. The police are doing their jobs, and they're trying to save any life that they can. You don't worry about whether you're moving a table or contaminating the crime scene. That's secondary to the preservation of human life, and that's what happened here.
Let's look at this fingerprint.
Okay.
All right, here's a fingerprint that did not match Darlie.
What was interesting about the evidence was that there was 14 fingerprints found in the home. 2 of them were in blood, and what they did was they said that it wasn't enough to run, so they didn't run them. And my experts say
Chris, why
8 and 12.
The defense attorneys have the right to do that.
I understand that. However, they didn't. Now, the thing is that the Plano Police Department was there's a gentleman there that was asked to see if they matched Darin or Darlie's fingerprints, and they didn't. Okay? Now, he never spoke to the defense. I spoke to him, and he's on the chain of custody. Now, here's the other one that was on the table. In the trial, now the reason, in the trial, James Crone says this is a child's print. And the reason why he can say that is because they didn't fingerprint the boys during their medical examination, or in the coroner's office. They didn't fingerprint the boys at all. They have no idea. So, yes, he can say that this is a boy's
Bill,
print.
could that have been an intruder? The fingerprint, could that be
These fingerprints are so high up on the door of what you saw over the intruder went out that the boys couldn't reach up that high.
It could support any theory that anybody wants to believe, I guess. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is, though, is this jury in Kerrville that heard all the evidence, the credible evidence, the admissible evidence. This was available to them. It was available to the prosecutors. It was available to the defense attorneys, and they chose to not believe that evidence. That's a right of every jury in every case. And all across
after 4.5 weeks of evidence, what they did was they went into the deliberation. It was 8-4. They rewound the silly string tape 9 times and then came up with a guilty verdict. And forget the 4 weeks of testimony. Out of what you saw earlier with the tape is pretty compelling.
Now, here are the questions that were asked in the polygraph test, and when we come back, we'll tell you how they were answered by Darin, and we can ask him today, too. Did he know who placed a bloody sock down the alley behind the family's Rowlett home? Did he stab his wife? Could he identify anyone who attacked his children? We'll be right back. We're so close to it up here on the stage. I want to get a reading from the audience as to where the questions are and what you need to know now.
I was just wondering why the officer approaching the murder scene, knowing that somebody was leaving, they said that somebody was leaving that area, nobody
Okay, we haven't talked about that.
That's a good question.
Waddell says, the first officer, that there was someone leaving the house when he arrived. Someone without a shirt on?
He actually said it was Darin. But then Chris digitized the 911 tape, and you can hear Darin throughout the entire 911 tape.
Darin didn't leave the scene.
Not Darin.
Darin didn't leave the scene at all until after the police and ambulance got there to go across the street. But he was on the tape in the beginning, in the middle, and also in the end. There was no other time.
He's the intruder. Truly, Waddell is the only one that really saw the intruder, and he walked away.
Well, that's what we'd like to know. Who was this person?
It seemed like out of all this time, they should have came up with somebody, a description of something,
But you know,
someone.
it was never addressed in the trial.
Well, there were no bloody footprints leading. That was another thing that looked bad for Darlie. Am I right that there were no bloody footprints leading out the back where she said the intruder escaped?
Actually, there was. There was blood in the garage.
Is that what this is, Chris?
No, this right here actually is part of, this is Damon right here. He's laying down. All his wounds are basically in this direction. And when you stab, you have a straight line on your knife. The guy either had to be in this area or this area. And what happened was I found that there was a footprint here in the blood that the blood actually goes into. So the boot print was actually there. Now, before I finish,
from a forensic standpoint,
let me finish.
Or is this your idea?
This right here was also blood that they had talked about. This right here is the imprint of the shoe that was in the other photo.
Is that you've had a forensic expert that's told you that?
Let me finish.
Well,
Else I'm never going to get through this.
No, that's just a yes or no.
This is right here. This is on their film. This is on their photo.
I understand, but throughout your
interpretation, exactly. And I say that in
your
book.
interpretation of it.
That's right. Okay. But the only thing is that there are no boots in the house, and the Routiers didn't own any boots.
How do you know it's on the primetime line?
Okay.
Was the bare
I actually
that
went and printed that out on the computer, and the lines actually line up with the marks that are on the door leading out. See, they testified that there would actually be blood on the bottoms of the feet, but there would be blood on the top. And when the door has marks of a ridge of a boot print.
If they could identify Bruno Mogli's shoes in the O.J. case, you'd think they could identify what happened here.
This was not even an issue. Let me finish.
What, Darin?
This was not even an issue.
They testified that within 20 minutes of them walking in on this crime scene, they had already made up their mind it was Darlie and it was a done deal.
And that was testified.
There was no one looking for the intruders. There was no investigation. There was only to be tested what the prosecution wanted to have tested, and we did not have the money to have tested that would prove Darlie's innocence. And that's
right. If we'd had money, it wouldn't happen.
The audience I talked about the polygraph. In Chris's book, this was from a news report. Darin, your quote is saying, "I have nothing to hide. I mean, if you're innocent of what they're accusing you of, then you're more likely to participate in the test to prove they're wrong." Well, you did take the polygraph test.
I did.
What were the results?
They said I failed.
They said you failed. I read the questions that you were asked. Do you have a reason as to why you think you failed it?
I was coerced into taking one. Then I was threatened to take one. In
He was
fear
interrogated
that,
for about an hour and a half.
I was interrogated
before.
by a police officer. I have a real problem with police officers. I'm in fear everywhere that I drive. You know, I take it. After the interrogation, I'm all upset.
Now, this was a polygraph, though, that was requested by the family, and it was a friend.
No, we didn't request.
No.
Well, Pardo, I mean, the guy that's working, it was.
He said
Let
he
me
would
tell
go
you,
long.
I was there for all those hours. Darin had not eaten in about 36 hours. He had nothing but a Dr. Pepper. And we thought, we were waiting out there for him. He came out as an hour and a half or 2 hours later. We thought it was over. They had just been in there telling him all these things he had done, and how he did it before it started. No, we did not hire him. Believe me, I can tell you. I jumped all over that man. I did not hire that man.
Pardo, the job.
Beginning, and then in Primetime Live, you all changed your mind down the line.
Wait, he wasn't even involved during Primetime Live.
No.
In the report that I got,
let me tell you, I was there.
Interesting, isn't it? We all know enough about it to form our own opinions.
Before that happened.
We'll be back to tell you about Darin's remarriage to Darlie behind bars. All right, stay close. Yes, you may. Barbara feels that what many of you said to me, she still doesn't think she's had time to address why she's changed her mind. Let's have no interruptions.
I changed my mind because of the evidence that I saw. Let's start with the injuries. We've talked about those. I would have loved to have seen her necklace, which everybody claimed that if it happened like she said, there would be nicks in the chain. But there were no nicks, I was told, and the jury was told, but there are two definite nicks in the necklace, pretty much positioned where they would be if she were laying flat. The other thing that is real important to me is I was told by the state that if this occurred the way she said, and she didn't do this over the sink, and she did it laying down on the couch, there would be blood on the couch. Where's all the blood? Well, I've seen the couch, and there's blood all over it. Now, one of my questions for Bill is, they released that bloody couch and a chair with just as much blood on it to this family. Now, I know personally there is a chair that a doctor was murdered in that is still there after 15 years in the evidence room in Tarrant County. Why would they release this bloody evidence that should support her story to this family who washed it off and sold it for her defense money?
The issue is whether people are involved on both sides of the docket, prosecutors and defense attorneys, that prohibit that from happening. There's not a good reason for why it did happen.
If life is perfect.
And it's not.
We started out by
especially
saying,
not in these kind of cases.
We started out saying this was a case of perception. Tell me when we come back how your perception of who Darlie is has changed. Because even though you changed your mind on the case, you weren't prepared to meet the person that you met in jail when you went there to ask for forgiveness.
Right.
We'll be right back. The case here. They spent 4.5 weeks. They may spend 4.5 more months if they get a retrial. Let me take it back to where we began, which is a more emotional place. Darin, you've never once, you told me time and time again, thought, what if she did it? No. You're so committed to Darlie that you have renewed your wedding vows?
Yeah, we had, even before all this happened to us, we had started talking about getting remarried on our 10th anniversary because our first wedding was real small. We spent a maximum of $50 or $500. Had a sweet little wedding in the back, and of course, you know, we were financially doing a lot better, and we wanted to really have a big party for the family and friends, and have Devin and Damon, you know, do the candles and and just have a real nice formal wedding that we really never had. And instead, we had to put our hands up against the glass and just look at each other and say, I love you, and I want to be with you for the rest of my life. And no matter what it takes, when I say, till death do us part, that's what I mean. Because I will be a man of my honor.
I know we have left you with a lot of unanswered questions. I also know as we say goodbye on this show that this family is probably going to leave once again with tremendous frustration because that's the nature of the death penalty case that their loved one is involved in. I also know there'll be another chapter. Chris's book, let me remind you of it once again, Hal, if you'll put it up on the screen. It's called Media Tried, Justice Denied. And I know that Barbara Davis is going to go home. When this show airs, a lot of people are going to be plenty upset with her.
Yes, they are.
We'll get some questions as we say goodbye with our thanks to all of you. Till next time.
The boot print, did they eliminate all the people that were on the crime scene investigating, all the cops, all the EMTs, all of the crime scene people?
They didn't do elimination prints on everybody.
Did they do elimination prints? Then how do you know that it's not there? That wasn't people dropping through the scene?
One of those people that were involved in the crime scene had been the first thing they put out there.
I would have explained it.
The police
Instead, they left it unexplained.
Comparisons. How would they know?
They did do comparisons.